We're applying the 80-20 rule here. 20% of things result in 80% of outcomes. If you know these 4 core functions, you should be good to go for whatever situation you are in. Hello and welcome back. Today's video will be an Excel tutorial which will be really helpful for you if you're either preparing for an interview or you just want to get better at your day-to-day job. Now, we all know that despite the rise of advanced tools like Python, BI platforms, cloud solutions, SQL, Excel still remains to be one of the most widely used tools across industries and roles. Now, like every other tool, Excel has a lot to offer, but there are 4 core things that if you can master, you can call yourself an intermediate or an advanced Excel user. Now, the key difference between today's world and the past is that just knowing how to type in equals VLOOKUP parentheses does not cut it anymore. Anyone can Google that. And so when you're going into interviews or when you want to get better at your role, knowing when to use it and why you would use a particular function is extremely important. And so I have gathered a few examples from my past interviews and my day-to-day job because I use Excel every day and I have been using it since 2016. And I've gathered them all in this video. So if you can master these 4 things and know when to use it, you should be good. I have linked a dummy data set in the description box below if you want to follow along. And there are also timestamps. So if you just are interested in one particular part of the video, you can jump ahead. Now let's get into it. Now, you might think that VLOOKUP is the best lookup function out there, but I don't agree. I only use VLOOKUP when the data set is extremely small, like 5 to 10 columns max, just a few rows, and I know that I won't be connecting it to multiple sheets and I won't be using that data set after. That's only when I use VLOOKUP. The reason is that as your data set increases, VLOOKUP starts to fall apart, especially if you need to be flexible with the data and you will be inserting or deleting any columns. Your unique identifier, basically the lookup value, always has to be in the leftmost column, and you have to count columns manually to get to your destination value. So I find it pretty annoying. That said, no matter the issues, you still need to know how to use VLOOKUP because interviewers expect you to use it. So especially if you're preparing for an interview, not knowing VLOOKUP is going to cost you. And honestly, if you have a very small data set, which is not going to change, VLOOKUP can actually be a good option. So let me show you how to use it. So if we look at the data set in front of us, we have our order ID, product ID, customer ID, amount, total, and whether the item was returned or not. So obviously the order tab has order information. The product tab has product information, what kind of product it is, what is the name, color, unit price. And then our customer ID is connected to the customer data where we have all our customer data. So what is their name, email, city, and country. However, we always want to have an ID because when we're combining data, we're merging data sets together, this is where the IDs come in handy. And so in our case, what I am looking to do is I want to understand the demographics that have been purchasing our products. And so in that case, I want to see where our customers are from. So I want to understand where we sell the most products. So which countries are our customers buying from? In that case, I would need the customer ID to pull the country information into our order data set. And the reason we want that is when you're analyzing data, for example, in the form of pivot tables, you want all your information together. You want consolidated information. If your data set is in different tabs here and there, you might have separate information about them, which is great, which you need. However, you won't be able to build any trends or any understanding around what your data is trying to tell you. And so that's why we want to bring everything together. Now that we want our country information based on customer IDs, we are going to use our lookup function, our first lookup function, which is VLOOKUP. You start by hitting the equals key on your keyboard and you start typing VLOOKUP. You'll see that it already gives you the option to use it. And so a shortcut is to hit the tab key on your keyboard, which brings up the complete function. And once it's brought up, you'll see that it shows you the values that it needs for the function to work. The first parameter is the lookup value. The second parameter is the table array. This is where our data lies. And the third parameter is the column index number, which is our destination column. It's the column that we require. In our case, the country column. If you don't want to use the shortcut, you would simply just type VLOOKUP and hit open parentheses. Our lookup value is the customer ID because this is the commonality between our two data sets, our order data set and our customer data set. both of these data sets have customer ID linking to customer information. This is the lookup value. To go to the second parameter, you will hit comma. Table array is where all our data lies, and so in this case, it's customer data, and we will be using our entire data set. You just want to make sure that your customer ID or your primary key or your unique identifier, however you want to call it, is always either in the leftmost column or at least to the left of the value that you are looking for. So in this case, the customer ID is in column A, so that should be good. And even if it was in column D, it would work as long as we wanted the country information. If we wanted city, customer email, or customer name, customer ID being in column A would not work. Your unique identifier or your lookup value cannot be to the right of the thing that you are looking for. So now that we have selected our complete table where our data lies, you will go in and hit comma again, and then it asks you for the column index number. So basically it's asking you to count to where your final value lies, the value that you are interested in lies, and add that number to your function. So in our case, including the lookup value or our unique identifier, it would be in column E, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you would hit 5 and then you can close parentheses because now the mandatory parameters in your function are complete, and then you would hit enter. So you'll see that customer 002 lives in the UK, which is correct. Customer 002 lives in the UK. And once you have the function set, you can just double click and it will drag down all the other values. And if you just want to do some spot checks, which you should always do in your data set to make sure that the values that you are getting are actually correct. A spot check basically just means picking up random numbers in your data set and manually checking if they're giving you the values that you are expecting. And so maybe let's just see customer 004, they live in Canada. Customer 004 lives in Canada. And so we know that our lookup value is correct. Similarly, if you wanted to see what product they are purchasing, let's see what information product has. So if you look at the product name, here you'll notice that there is no customer ID, right? Because it's not customer information. So in this case, to check which product did this customer purchase, because product ID doesn't really tell us anything, you would use the product ID in this case. And so I'm doing this so that you can do it with me. Pause the video and do it yourself, and then you can just check if you get the same value. You would hit equals Vlookup, hit tab so that it comes up itself. Make sure that you use as many shortcuts as possible. You don't want to use your mouse when you're working on Excel. It just slows you down. Your lookup value in this case, because we're looking at product name and not customer information, it's product ID. Then you will hit comma. Our table array is where is our information? Where does the data lie? The data lies in the product column and it's from A to D. You can also specifically select the cells that contain the values. It's just quicker to select the entire thing. And then you hit comma again. In this case, you want number 2 because you want the product name. You always count the unique identifier column, which is number 1. So A and B, 1, 2. And you would hit 2, you would close the parentheses, and you get that customer 002 who lives in the UK bought product A102, which is an office desk. So A102 is an office desk. So this is how VLOOKUP is used. So one thing you want to look at when you select specific cells instead of the entire column is you want to lock those values. So if I double click here, you'll see that I'm getting a lot of NAs, and this is because if you go into the cell, and this is how you debug your functions if they're not working. If you go into the cell, you'll see that in the first cell, it says table A1 to D9, which is the correct table, but here it's changing it. It says A2 to D10. And in the next one, it says A3 to D11, right? A3 to D11. But this is not right because this is just checking A3 to D11. But our product ID is in row number 2, and so that won't work. It doesn't have the table there. When you are choosing specific cells, you want to make sure you lock them. And by locking, I mean you put the $ before both your column and your row. The shortcut for that is to hit function and F4 on your keyboard, and it will add a $ before both the column and the row number. Now when you double click, you'll see everything is working, because no matter where you go in your cell, you'll see that A1 D9 remains consistent throughout and it's not changing. So those are the two things that are important. We went through the VLOOKUP function, and now let's move on to the next one. So you're probably thinking that if I don't use VLOOKUP, what do I use to look up values? It's index match. It is my go-to lookup function for medium to large data sets. And honestly, that's the kind of data I'm working with most of the time. So index match is my go-to function. The main reason I use index match is that it gives you way more flexibility than VLOOKUP. You can insert and delete columns as you like. Your unique identifier or the lookup value does not always have to be in the leftmost position. It can be anywhere in your data set. And this is because it's built on two dynamic functions instead of fixed column positions. I learned how to use index match back in 2016, and since then I've pretty much abandoned VLOOKUP, and honestly it looks really good in interviews as well. If you can show that you know how to use index match, you sometimes get some brownie points. There's a learning curve at the beginning, but honestly, once you get used to it, I can guarantee you that this is the function that you will be using, especially when you have medium to large data sets. We will pull the same thing as before, country and product name, but this time instead of VLOOKUP, we're looking at index match. Index match, like I mentioned, is built on two dynamic functions, match and index. And to really understand how it works, it's easy to break it down. That's how I learned it as well. And so I will first show you what match does, and then I'll combine that with index, and then we'll bring the two together. We'll start with the match function equals match, hit tab. It's asking for the lookup value, the lookup array, and the match type. In this case, we'll use all three parameters, even though match type is optional, like you can see, since it's in brackets. Our lookup value is customer ID, same as before. Now the difference here is our lookup array is going to just be the ID column. It's not going to be the entire table, just the ID column, because we're looking at where that ID lies in that column. We want the exact match, so we'll do 0 and close parentheses, and it gives us the number 3. Now remember that this is part of the index function. It's going to go in the index function. We're not just using the match function. And this 3 is basically indicating the row where CUST002 lies. So if we go back to our customer data, C002 is in row number 3. So now we know what the match function does. Let's look at index. If we look at the index function, it's asking for a few things. It's asking for the reference, the row number, and the column number. So now we'll look at the index function. Type index, we go into customer data, and what do we want here? We want country, right? And so we're just going to select our entire column, comma, and then we'll use the match function. So because see here, it's asking for the row number, and match function is going to give us our row number. And so we'll say match, do exactly what we did before. Our customer ID is CUST002. Go back to customer data, select the column where the customer ID is. It's an exact match. You close the first parentheses for the match function, and then you close the second parentheses for the index function, and you hit enter, which gives you UK. So if I do it together, equals index, what do I want? What is my destination? It's country. Country is what I want. You hit match, our customer ID, which is the lookup value. Where is our customer ID? In this column, comma 0, close match, close index. And it gives you the same answer. And if you double click, it's going to do the same thing that VLOOKUP did. Now, this might feel a little intimidating at first, and you might be feeling overwhelmed right now, but trust me, when you try this over and over again, it becomes very easy because it uses dynamic functions. So try that with me for product name. Equals index. What do we want? We want the product name. Where do we want it? Which row is it in? So then we use the match function for that. Our unique identifier or our lookup value is A102. You hit comma. Where is it? It's in product ID. Now, imagine both scenarios where you have VLOOKUP with columns up till AZ, and you have to count from your ID column all the way to where your destination column is. And then imagine this, you just look into your data set with index, this is what I want, select the column, with match, this is my ID, select the column. So dynamic functions will always trump functions like VLOOKUP where you have to do manual counting. That doesn't really ever work for larger data sets. Again, I would encourage you to try it with customer email, and you'll see that once you get a few reps in, this is going to be your favorite function. On to the next one. Pivot tables is the most used feature in Excel. So once you've analyzed your data, your interviewer or your work assignment may require you to summarize a data set or show some trends, and this is when pivot tables come handy. So in interviews or business case studies, you want to use pivot tables when you have been given a data set and asked to make sense of it, or maybe show the data story around it. Let me show you how to use it. So I've brought in city, country, product name from our other tabs, and I'm going to demonstrate how we use this data to make business decisions, which is what pivot table is used for. One thing to note is you must have column headings to use pivot tables. So if, for example, I had something here, we wouldn't be able to select these two data points just because it has no header. So I'm going to go ahead and select my entire data set. You'll see blanks in the pivot table, but I don't really care about that right now. Insert pivot table. It asks you where you want to insert the pivot table. I'm just going to go new sheet. And my goal right now here is I want to understand where I can expand my business, where I'm selling the most products, and this is what my pivot table is going to show me. So the first question I want to answer is which country buys the most products? And so I want to aggregate my data based on country. So I'll select country, which goes in the rows. I want to know how many products were sold. So I'll take product name and I'll put it in values. Now, because this is values, it's going to count the number of products. So we can see that in the UK, we sold the most number of products. When you have large amounts of data, you may not just have 3 countries, you'll have a lot of data, and sometimes numbers don't really make sense. You want to see relative information. So in this case, I might want to look at the percentage of items that have been sold per country. So what I can do is I can bring product name here again, and I'll go into field settings. I want to show data as percentage of grand total, hit OK, and it shows you the percentage of items sold. So even though it may have seemed that 42 and 34 were way off, and somehow it's adding up to 100, which is great, but 42% and 34% is not that far off. So I can see that the UK and Canada are the places that I sell my most products in. So maybe if I'm thinking of expanding, I would go into those countries first. Now, the countries are really big. What about the different cities? Where do I actually start? So I can bring city into my rows column because it's going to break it down by rows. And then I can see that in Canada, Birmingham is not in Canada. This is incorrect. Seattle is also not in Canada. Anyways, this is ChatGPT data, so it's not correct, but you get the point, right? When you want to break things down and when you want to consolidate data and make sense of it, that's when you use pivot tables. If I wanted to look at the products which were the most popular and I didn't really care about what country they were in, so I would bring product name here, and then I can just bring product name here again, and I'll see how many products were sold of each item. Maybe I want to see how my products are working in the market once they are sold. What is my return rate? I would bring down items returned. There's yes and no, and I would bring down product names in the rows to see which products have been returned, which haven't been returned, and I can look at the number of products that are returned. So 89% of my items are not being returned, but 11% are being returned. So overall, the company is doing well, our products are well, and we don't really need to change the products in any way because it looks like they're working. When you have larger data sets, you can get into the reasons why they've been sold, what colors are working, what are not working. And so this is when you use pivot tables to make sense of your data, but it's important to understand the lookup functions before you bring everything together. The last thing you want to be able to do is quick aggregation and conditionals. This can be used for 2 things. One, when you have your data set and you want concluding metrics at the end. For example, if you want the grand total, you can use sum. If you want the average, you can use average. The second scenario is when you want quick answers. For example, if your manager pings you mid-meeting asking for some quick totals to present in that meeting, that is when you will quickly go into Excel, because you don't need SQL or Python or anything fancy like that. You want to move quickly. A lot of people don't talk about this. It seems so normal and easy, but these are the essentials. And in fact, I have been asked in interviews, when I want quick answers, what would I use and why would I use it? So the interviewer is not looking to see if I actually know how to type equal sum parentheses, because anyone can Google that. What they're seeing is, does this person know what logic to apply when? Can she move fast? Does she understand what she's doing? And so that is when these small, easy, quick aggregation functions come in handy. Do you want to see how to do it? Let's go. Sometimes we just want quick values. If this was a financial data set, the way you would use aggregation and conditionals would be very different. Usually there's a grand total. You look at the revenue, you sum everything up. If, for example, I wanted to look at how much I've sold in revenue, you can just go to the very bottom of the data set and you would do equals sum, because we're just adding it up. And you select the entire column. So you can hit Command Shift and go all the way up, Shift, and one step down, because we only want it until then, close parentheses, and then you'll see the total. So you have sold 72,820 worth of products, but you can also use it for quick sums. If I want to see how many products have been sold in the UK, we'll do sum if. We want the range to check for the condition. Our range is H. The criteria is UK. And what is our sum range? Which column do you want to add up? Which is column D. And so the total number of items sold in the UK is 121. We can spot check this by filtering. So we select our data set. You add a filter on UK, and Command Shift all the way down. Our sum over at the bottom right is 121. So we were correct. And now this is when quick aggregation comes in handy. Please go ahead and count the values or sum the values for Canada and USA. To give you an example of when you would use conditionals, I've changed the amounts in column D. So again, this data set is generated by ChatGPT, so it's not as helpful as I would have liked, but I just want to give you an example of when you would use a conditional. Suppose we were told that anytime the amount was greater than 75, it's a business. So we want to know which orders were business orders and otherwise. This is when you can use a conditional. So if this amount is greater than 75, you can label it as business, otherwise it's individual, right? And then you can just drag it down. This is when conditionals come in handy, and once you have this data, you can create a pivot table and check how many businesses are buying our items versus individuals. I'm just going to end the video with a few tips about interviews, so don't go anywhere. So now you're an Excel genius and you don't need to know anything else in Excel. I'm just joking. There are still a lot of things that Excel has to offer, and you might have to research or watch other videos for that. But in this video, I wanted to focus on the main things that you need to call yourself an intermediate or advanced Excel user if you know the core functions. We're applying the 80-20 rule here. 20% of things result in 80% of outcomes. If you know these 4 core functions, you should be good to go for whatever situation you are in. One thing to know for lookup functions, VLOOKUP and index match, is when you're attempting a take-home assignment or even doing it live, make sure that you use both functions. If you just use index match because that is the cool function, that is not going to be enough. Interviewers, like I mentioned in my video, still want to see that you can use the quick VLOOKUP function. And so what I usually do is, for one thing, I use VLOOKUP and I put in a comment. And then for everything else, I use index match. And whenever you're attempting take-home assignments, make sure to always write your logic down. Even if it's in Excel, you can add it in comments, or you can have a separate tab at the beginning, which has your logic written down, because people want to know how you think, right? So with these functions, make sure to never forget to always talk about your logic. If you found any part of this video helpful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you can see me again. I'll see you next time. Thanks for spending your time with me. Bye.